I almost forgot pistachio bros and pistachios. Lecture's not over. I almost made a critical error and failed y'all, but I did mention we were going to go over examples, so let's get into it and look at some examples of these ass shapes and the sizes and everything like that. So we're going to start off with this picture of Lady Gaga right here. We're going to actually go back into paint here. We're going to go back into paint over here, and we're going to kind of be looking at things now and putting them more on perspective, getting an actual idea of the things we're talking about. So we look at Lady Gaga here. What would you say this ass shape is? We will go and refer back to the shapes, right? So we're looking kind of at a side quarter profile, right? But if you look, right, this is what I mean by it's hard. Is this a D shape, right? Is this more of a D shape? Or I almost failed y'all. Is this a D shape? Or is it more of a P shape? Right? Or is it more of a P shape? It's kind of hard to tell with the side quarter profile here. So we'll go on to a different example now. Go to a different picture of Lady Gaga. Right? So we'll open this one up. Now can you tell? Alright, so that side quarter profile I didn't really do y'all the best on. So we'll open up and we'll start it actually better with here. That first example was basically to show y'all exactly what I mean by it being hard to kind of do, especially at like side profiles like that, things like that, right? And like rubbernecking quick glances. But as you can see, right, she is like at a weird angle. She's not standing straight up, so it's hard to kind of tell. But regardless, she has this arch here. But regardless of those factors, I would put her, right, I'd rate this more in the D shape, right? Because if it was a P, right, if it was a P, what would happen is, right, even if her legs are like this, and then kind of like her hip is here, and then you have like hip here, and then like femur bone or whatever here, a P shape would still be more P'd, and then it'd go down more. It'd be more of a definitive, again, like P shape than anything, whereas this is more soft and subtle, and it's more of a D shape, right? So then we go back to here. Can we tell what head-on shape it is, right? Immediately, we can kind of rule out it being a mountain, right? A mountain shape, because a mountain would kind of, as we get from where her, because we could say that her cheeks stop right here, right? Where it's like ass, leg, right? Ass, legs. And so we would draw that line there, and then say if it was a mountain, we'd go up, right? And it'd be more going kind of and tapering more, not necessarily in, but tapering up a lot more when it comes to the shape. And if we're an iceberg, right, we could say that probably, even though she has an arch, her back probably stops there and her butt starts there. It stops and ends there. Stops and starts right there. And if it was an iceberg, we'd be more up here, so more of these voluptuous cheeks up here, they'd be more up here if we were in an iceberg configuration, and we'd be going kind of in that shape, right? It would be more up here, right? It would be more shaping up here and then tapering down up here. So this is a prime example of, like I was saying, a tree trunk, right? Where it's like, as you can see back starts and stops there, and then legs start and stop there, and it's very uniform going down, right? We're very uniform. We're not taking consideration like the width of her hips per se. That's why we're cutting it like that. But it's very uniform. It's not like we have a lot of bubble up here or a lot of it necessarily down here to facilitate it being a mountain. You know, we're not saying it's like that. So it's very tree trunk, which is fine. So that's one example, right? And we can kind of see it here as well. Very within the confines of her thighs, right? It doesn't necessarily taper, like it doesn't necessarily go like this, and it gets bigger down, and it doesn't necessarily do the inverse of that, where it's kind of starts off high up here, right? It's very uniform, right, in the way that it's shaped, right? Because if it was a mountain, we'd have it basically not be as uniform up here, but then it wouldn't be as uniform up here. Oh, let me do it better. It wouldn't be as uniform up here, and it'd be like, okay, and then it just gets bigger and bigger, and then probably it would go kind of thin like that if it was a mountain. Right, looking at that side quarter profile of her cheeks, right, of her booty. If we were an iceberg, right, we'd basically have a lot more up here, right, and then as we get lower and lower, we do something like that. So she's very uniform right, her cheeks are very uniform, her booty's very uniform, where it's the same. It's almost like it goes like this and goes like that, right? But it's very kind of even, making it a D shape and a tree trunk, because we're not necessarily gaining a lot as we go down. We're not gaining a lot like that, and we're not necessarily like being like this, or we're not necessarily being like that, if that makes sense. That one was an awful drawing. It'd be more of something like that, or realistically like kind of like that would be like, if you're looking at a side profile, that would be more of a mountain, and the opposite would be true. So this would be more of an iceberg shape. If you're talking about just the curve, ignore this. I'm just going to draw on her now. This would be an iceberg, right? So we'll do it like this, right? This is a mountain. This would be an iceberg. See, it kind of like flips, right? It kind of flips. And then a tree trunk would be more, right? A tree trunk, like I'm saying, you're looking head on, is more uniform, right? Straight up and down. So now we'll move on to other celebrity examples. So here, right? So here we have, oops, not that. Here we have Angel Reese, the WNBA player. As you can see, we got a lot going on up here. Easily identified as a D shape, right? The most common shape. But we have a lot going on here, right? I don't have a good example of her looking head on, but that's a very good example of what a D shape would look like. It's a very common shape. We look at Doja Cat. We look at Doja Cat here, and we see this is a more kind of head on. Right, this is a more kind of head on, But as we see, she's got more of a mountain type from the head on, because it's less up here towards the hip, and it gets bigger as we move down the cheek and go towards the leg, right, where the crease of the leg is. That's more of a mountaintop. Or not mountaintop, but that's more of a mountain type build there. As you can see, good example of a mountain build. Then we move on to, here's an example of Ice Spice of before and after her weight loss. We have two good side quarter profiles here. Again, as you can tell, from just here, you can tell that Ice before weight loss has a more mountain build, because it has a peak here and it gradually gets bigger as we move down the leg and go towards the cheek, right? Mountain type build. She still remains, and also a D shape. So then we also have that D shape, right? And as we look at her after her weight loss, it's kind of the same, right? It doesn't really move too much. It's still a mountain. I'm gonna use the same colors. It's still a mountain type, because it's thinner up here and builds out and then comes back and is like that, and we still remain with that overall D shape. Moving on to our next one, we're going to look at another example of Ice Spice, just to hammer it home for those at home. We have that kind of peak here, and then we move down and then curve over, and then D shape plus mountain shape. Moving on to the next one, our next example, we have Megan the Stallion. Yes, we have Megan the Stallion. Again, I guess I found a lot of examples of these mountain types. But again, starting at here, moving down, curving around, it gets bigger as we go down. Mountain, peak, the base, mountain, very, very D shape. It's very common. It's a very common build. Nothing wrong with that. Then we have Sabrina Carpenter in whatever fucking music video this is. But as we can see, she's probably more built like a tree trunk, right? Because it's a very kind of even, and then, right, it like basically goes back, and it's kind of like very even here, right? As you can see, this is the better thing, head on, right? We can see that it's mostly, and that she's like at an angle, so we can see mostly that it's like a tree trunk, right? It's very uniform. It's not necessarily that it's like purely fucking going like this, where it goes, I should say, right? It's not like it's like this, and it's not like it's like, right? It's not like it's like that, and it's not like it's like that either. She is a good example where we get pretty close to having a P shape, right? We get kind of close with having a P shape here, right? It's very, very subtle though. Next one, let's me find this example. So we'll go to here, we'll go here, we'll open that one. Nope, not that one. We'll go here, we'll go here, we'll open this one. And this is one that's probably my favorite. This is my favorite build of all time. My favorite shape is the teardrop shape. So as you can see, this is an example of a mountain and a teardrop, because we have kind of that it gets bigger and then it like, oh my god, this is like perfect teardrop, and then we have that mountain shape where it's peak and then it gets bigger at the bottom, right? And then you have the base. This is an example where it would be, it's hard to tell from this angle, but this probably would be more again akin to a slight P, because we have that shape here and then we have it like that, right? But this is my favorite example. This is my favorite one. I am sad that I didn't find, and defeated that I didn't find jolly good examples of those icebergs. We had some good examples of the kind of those tree trunks. I would say, if anything, as we look at them, we go to here, we can identify some of them here. Like we can just kind of identify them as, like, obviously this is a mountain, right? Starts thin, gets bigger as we go down. This is also an example of a P shape, right? Very uniform, right? Very uniform. But this might also be considered, it's very in the category where it could technically be almost an iceberg, but it's not, so we're not going to say it is. This would be basically almost like an iceberg where it's wider and it kind of moves down like that. Another example of icebergs, right, like that. Mountains are usually the most common types, so but this would be more of head on, like if we want to have this like weird side quarter profile here. This would be very like tree trunk, because it's very uniform, right? We start kind of at the same place and end at the same place. It's not like we go like here and get wider and bigger, right? Definitely also here would be another tree trunk example where we have it kind of start and end at the same place. This might actually also be a good example of an iceberg where, oh, not an iceberg, sorry. That's another mountain. 3's a mountain, right? We kind of start at a certain point, get bigger towards the bottom. Icebergs are, just like in real life, with that stuff, the Titanic, a little bit more rare, because, like I said, an iceberg requires it to essentially start off. This might almost kind of, if we were to look at it for like, this could classify almost as one, right? But not really, because we get a little bit bigger here, and then yeah, but like I was saying, I almost let y'all guys down without giving all those visual examples, but that actually, boys and girls, Pashy Hoes, Pashy Bros, will be the lecture for today. Stay steez.